is up, everyone? It's me, Stuart P. Turner. This is the Flow State podcast. Running a tiny bit behind schedule today, but whatever. It's Friday. And as I somewhat terribly predicted last week, the sun has finally come back out. Actually tying into the theme of today's episode in a lateral fashion, which I will talk to you about in a minute. But after I said the sun had come back out in New South Wales last week, it obviously just tanked it down again for 2 days. So sorry about that. I want to say that it wasn't just me and my bad, opening my mouth. I feel like the weather was partly to blame. But look, we're back. Sun's back. It's Friday. It's nearly the weekend. And today we're going to talk about a serious topic. Are you being cyberbullied by AI at work? Now, I don't mean are people, going onto your Facebook profile and just putting yikes under all your old holiday photos. What I mean is there's a lot of chat at the minute, and there has been for the past couple of years, about how AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. Now, those of us in white collar world, especially people who work in digital, like me and my fellow digital people, we were like, look, what we do is super complicated and, no one's going to be able to understand or do it. So we're safe, right? We're doing mysterious internet things, and people still don't really know what my job is, right? And I can't be bothered to really explain, to be honest. I'm I just do computers. But now AI is coming for us, isn't it? It can theoretically do our jobs. And what I wanted to talk about today, I'm going to do my best to actually explain what I'm looking at in the show for anyone who's only listening. And as usual, we'll share the links. Look, AI potentially is coming for a few of our jobs, but a lot of the discussions that I've been having over the past few shows and a lot of research is now suggesting, I think somewhat, optimistically, that it might be replacing jobs. On a previous show, we saw a European media publisher was essentially forcing AI on everybody. C-suite people in your company are probably talking about it. They're probably trying to force you to do it because someone's mentioned a new model or a tool or whatever. So look, if you feel like you're being bullied into using AI, or you feel like AI could actually be being brought in to replace you, and you feel like the number crunchers are thinking, I could probably just draw a few red pen lines through some of these lines in the old P&L, and we could just replace them with a subscription. I want to talk about how you can fight back against that right now, and how you can lead into your human powers, the powers of us as human animals, to fight back against the encroaching of AI into your role. And obviously, in order to do that, I'm gonna use AI to explain how you can avoid AI taking your job. So, without further ado, I thought I'd do what we all do, right? So if you jump onto our old mate Google, still trucking along at the moment, though they're shoving a lot of AI crap into their search results. What you can see before you if you're watching now, and what you will need to imagine if you are listening, and as I said, I'll share the link so you can click along, this is a set of search results based on the term AI predicted to replace jobs. Pretty broad, starting pretty broad. And what Google has got to say about this, based on its own set of results, is interesting, I think. So, what Google are saying in various different ways is that, look, there are a lot of jobs. AI is predicted to replace millions of jobs, apparently, particularly administrative, manufacturing and customer service roles. Google's pulling out. Now, I've got a few things to say about that tie into, my current focus in the world of B2B marketing and sales and revenue growth. The one that's most interested here, this is a bit of a non sequitur as a prediction, right? Because obviously AI is gonna replace or augment a lot of jobs. What I find funny though is that a lot of the augmentation is driven by the behind the scenes agenda of a lot of AI businesses, which is not to actually help people. It's just to make a ton of money before the bubble bursts. So if you are, somewhat aged like me, will remember the great outsourcing of the late 90s into early 2000s, where when I was living in the UK at the time, we saw a horrifying shift in customer experience as loads of companies realised that they could outsource a lot of their core customer service operations to cheaper markets, right? And this led to a lot of pretty poor racist chat, let's be honest. But the reason for all that was because these companies basically were like, and this happened a lot in the UK, they were like, oh great, we could just outsource all our call centers to like India was a popular destination at the time. And you have all these poor fools in like, you know, in various huge sweatshop type conditions in India, chucked into call centers, super poorly trained, you know, language barriers, all kinds of like just basic issues with working across two different countries with two very different sort of languages and work cultures. And then you've got like a core frontline service of your business that is irreparably damaged, you know, damage to the brand, damage to people's experience, customers leaving. But all these companies saw was like, well, look, there'll be a bit of short-term pain, but this is going to be cheaper in the long run, isn't it? And they didn't care about the brand experience, right? They were just like, oh, how can we make this cheaper? And we're seeing this, it's exactly the same situation with AI now, right? Because you can even cut out the cheap outsourced people. You can just bring in a tool to do it, which delivers an equally terrible experience to your potential and current customers. So what's concerning me here, just at the very first sort of, I guess, juncture in this discussion, is you see stuff like customer service representatives are going to get replaced with AI. Market research analysts, telemarketers, these are very human-centric roles that people, you know, want people in. So a lot of like value add now that pendulum swung back the other way, like, you know, 10, 20 years later, is that loads of brands now are like, all our call center staff are onshore, they're not offshored. All our customer service staff are onshore in the same country. And it's funny to me that is like, a value add sort of proposition now, when anyone with any sense could have seen that just wholesale outsourcing very sort of complex relationships with your brand to another country that doesn't speak your language was not going to go very well. So I guess reassuring point number one for me here is, if you need examples to refer back to where this kind of massive race to save money has gone horribly wrong, offshoring of call centers was a massive one. Totally crap experience for everyone involved, like on the employment side and on the customer side. And that is exactly what's going to happen with AI. Like, you're going to get poorly trained, poorly deployed AI bots trying to service customers, and they're just not going to do it very well. Probably because they fired all the people who could have managed that process, because they've been replaced by AI as well. Now, if you like, Stu, that seems like a bit of a reach into the distant past. Like, nobody's calling anyone anymore. I'd be like, all right, fair play. I'll take that criticism. Let me give you a slightly more recent one, more directly related to a company I was, one of my companies from a few years ago, actually. So step ahead 10 years. All right, we're over call centers. Everyone's like, oh, I can do live chat now. Like, you know, we've all got iPhones. We're all on Android phones, whatever. We can do live chat on websites. This is good. So what happened just before the explosion of large language models was that everyone was doing, took call routing from call centers and they just deployed it into live chat. We had like little decision trees. You could walk through them. You know, they'd ask you questions and lead you down a little journey. That was all crap as well, wasn't it? Because they were already poorly thought out, and the journey's often ended in a dead end, and then you just have to keep asking to speak to a person, which, you know, I'm sure if you're like me and you like the idea of live chat, but you just want to skip all the shit and you just want to get straight to talking to a person. I'm just like, talk to an agent. There's like, what's your question? Like, talk to an agent, talk to a person. Like, that's the only way to get anything done, right? So again, this is a more recent example. That experience, 99% rubbish, 1% good. AI is not going to fix that. AI is just a way to do that at a higher rate in a much worse way. So again, what concerns me a bit about this, and you know, this is slightly outside of obviously what we talk about normally, but you know, in connection with you protecting your brand, is any company who's just thinking, oh, we'll just wholesale outsource our customer support to AI tools, like, crazy, terrible decision. Where there's some great augmentation here is you should be running some interesting data collection and data analysis behind the scenes to improve your frontline services and make them a lot more efficient. Can you just replace them? No, of course you can't. It's terrible. Like, you know, just why would you even think about that? So just as a pertinent sort of first example, I thought that was an interesting one, because that's one we surely have all experienced. And look, I would suggest I don't particularly want to experience again, to be perfectly honest. So look, that was just a it has been top of mind recently because I've been speaking to quite a few people who've been kind of in these positions, or this is happening in their brands, and like it just seems like a mad way to approach, leveraging AI. And the reason this is relevant is like we talk a lot about sort of two different deployments of AI at the moment in our companies. Like one is the co-pilot approach, which is, as it sounds, AI is there to assist you as a co-pilot to help you through what you're doing. And the other is the baked in AI done, properly actually deployed into the infrastructure of a business. Now, nobody is really there unless you're an AI business yet. Everyone's on that journey at the moment. And this is where the real danger is, right? And going back to the theme of the episode of, you're getting cyber bullied about this. Are people just being like, AI can, and marketing gets a lot of flack for this all the time, right? You can just get an AI to do a marketing job now, but you can't, right? You just can't. So there's a few interesting stories here. Forbes have written, their usual sort of, I'll just bang out some probably AI generated on trend articles about this. I'm not going to go into that because it's not super interesting. What I do want to talk about is like there's a few interesting points on this World Economic Forum story that I'll share around. This stuff's quite funny, just, what jobs is AI going to replace and how? And this one, what 3 jobs are going to survive AI? This is great, right? So depending on who you read and where, Big Bill Gates predicts only 3 jobs are going to survive the AI takeover. What are those jobs? You have to read the article to find out. Very interesting. So look, I'll get on with it. I know what you're thinking. Stu, just rambling. This is not to the point whatsoever. So fair play. Let's move on. Let me share with you what the World Economic Forum is saying about this, because they've got some interesting takes on this stuff as well. So what I want to do, very briefly, is just show you what they've got to say, and then we can dive into how you can fight back against the potential cyberbullying that might be going on in your world. So look, this is an interesting article. Why is it replacing some jobs faster than others? Now, if you are in the digital world like I am, this is probably not super surprising. Data-rich industries are prone to being disrupted. Obviously they are. AI models need loads of data. Data-poor industries are not. What is interesting down here, though, is I found we've got a directly sort of, well, maybe not directly, an opposing experience to the World Economic Forum of like, look, the World Economic Forum thinks that because the internet is full of data, large language models are like way ahead of the game. And look, they are to a degree, but as we talk about a lot in our businesses, just because there is a lot of data there doesn't mean it's actually useful or good. And as I've spoken about several times before, where we're hitting the limits of LLMs is like, yes, you can get some good stuff out of them, but it still requires a fair bit of time and a lot of critical thinking. That cannot be replaced by a robot, right? So you cannot in any sort of serious conversation think that you can replace human-centered critical thinking with a language model. Like, it just isn't going to happen in our lifetimes, I don't think. I may well be proved wrong, but look, if I'm dead before it happens, I win, basically. That's the position I'm taking. But look, this article's interesting because they're like, look, you've got like Waymo, Tesla, they're investing millions of dollars into AI because they want self-driving cars and all this other stuff. And you're like, you look at the deployment of self-driving cars, like the only successful place that full self-driving is happening is in a very small part of San Francisco at the moment, because there's been intense mapping of the streets, behaviors, and everything that happens there, and they still don't work properly. Like, I don't know if this is still the case, but you could, last year people were just going and putting cones on top of like Waymo cabs because you could just stop them working because they thought that there was an obstacle. They can't handle like unexpected input well, changes to road rules, regulations, like they just don't know what's going on. So this is actually a perfect example of why this isn't working to me. And also where, from a data set perspective, the ability for any kind of AI model to ingest and use unexpected data is also not there. So as a sort of, again, coming back to like you defending your position here, if you're getting kind of bullied about how AI can be used, you've got to come back to this data piece, like garbage in, garbage out. That's rule number 1. Like if you just put loads and loads of crap data into something, you're going to get a crap output. Rule number 2, to pick back up on things we talked about previously, is data governance and security. Do you want to be putting all of your precious IP and first-party data into someone else's model that they are using to make as much money as possible, not for you. Like I've been saying this about Google for years, the social media networks for years, they're all doing the same thing, right? We've got a mutually semi-beneficial relationship, but you've got to be aware of where that sort of sliding value is for you as a customer versus them as a business. And the bigger your business gets, the more of a concern that becomes, because, and particularly if you're a data-driven business, like your data is your money, right? And like we're building a very data-centric business at the moment. Like our other startup, like FlowState, obviously deals with a lot of data, but we don't like own a lot of it. Whereas the new business is going to own a lot of data, and the two sort of use cases there, like data security and governance, comes up all the time. So you got to be super careful. And look, I thought this was a funny one, right? AI is like that kid in college who's got access to all the exams and the study guides. Of course they're going to crush the test compared to... Well, not necessarily, right? Because where this analogy falls over for me is like, look, you can have access to all the information in the world. If you don't bother to actually look at that information and learn why it's useful, that just makes you just as useless as someone who hasn't studied at all. And this goes back to a theme that's constantly recurring in these shows, which is just because you can do something super easily doesn't mean you understand the why or the how of doing the thing. And if you don't understand that, you're not really going to get anywhere. So point number 3 that I was arriving at here in your defense against, AI-oriented cyberbullying is you've got to actually know what you're doing. And the challenge we have at the moment, and where this analogy is also quite pertinent, is universities and higher education are under massive attack at the moment from AI, because people are just cheating their way through the degrees. They're not really actually learning stuff. They're just ticking the boxes, because a large proportion of people who are going to university, and we see this a lot in Australia, is not because they, want to go to the hallowed halls of education and learn stuff. They're just trying to tick a box to do something else. Now that might just be get a job. It might be able to be stay in a country. It might be to, elevate to like some faster level of their career. But as I'm sure any of you remember who've been to university, this happened to me, and I graduated like many, many years ago now. Just because you've got a degree doesn't mean anyone in the working world actually cares at all. They still think that you don't know how to do anything. And like, that's only become even worse. Like I had to actually use a pen and paper in addition to a computer when I was at uni. And if you've like AI'd your way through your degree, you're even more useless than students from my generation. And they were perceived to be incredibly useless. So like that, there you go. That should be very reassuring. So look, this was an interesting one. What I also felt was interesting here is the World Economic Forum also think customer support, like another sitting duck, according to their language, ripe for AI automation due to abundant data. Now, I agree to an extent. However, there has to still be people in customer support. Like, I hate companies where you cannot speak to somebody. And like the value that we delivered in my previous software startup was 99% based around the fact that if anyone signed up to our platform or anyone was in our platform, they could speak to me or one of our team, because we were all there in live chat all the time. And they were constantly surprised when they were asking for stuff, and we could be like, oh, do you want to just like jump on a meeting now and we can just talk about it? So that, like, I think is actually a massive differentiator now. And again, coming back to, how you defend yourself against all this automation, you've got to be like, look, the data is great. If we can surface more self-led help, that's awesome. If people don't need to contact customer service, brilliant. If they do need to contact customer service, though, they should be able to talk to a well-trained person who can do stuff. That's just where it is, right? Just where it is. Interestingly, I found this quite fun as well. So sectors with a lack of data, healthcare, mad that the World Economic Forum does not realise that the healthcare industry is sitting on an absolutely huge amount of data. It's just very, very fragmented. They've noted that it's fragmented, right? Scarce public data, yeah, obviously. But like, I know quite a few companies who are building pretty awesome stuff in the healthcare space. And look, the hard job there is that they're dealing with a lot of very confidential data, which again means that you can't just be chucking that into ChatGPT. But that's where, you're in the solve hard problems, win big rewards territory. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in healthcare. And I actually think that that's one of the most sort of, one of the biggest opportunities where AI can actually like deliver huge amounts of value in like helping us all make better decisions about our our well-being and our health. So that was an interesting one. Education's in the same bucket, to be honest. Like, there's a lot you could do with education that would be very beneficial, but similar to healthcare, privacy laws, you're obviously dealing with minors. There's a lot of like sort of guardrails around that need to be addressed. So going back to what I was saying, like, I just think there's a lot of ways you can address that potential risk, and kick back against AI coming for your job. So look, that's what the World Economic Forum's got to say about it. The one thing I wanted to end on, is keeping it pretty short and sharp today. The one thing I wanted to end on here, because this is just a bit of a sort of whimsical look at, some of the themes we've talked about already. What I wanted to end on, and sorry, this is a bit clunky if you're watching this, because I didn't prep properly. I hadn't got all my sharing set up today. Let me share this again for you. What I wanted to end on, which is a bit of a funnier one, on a more philosophical note, is we're really bad people at predicting what's going to happen in the future. Now, there's a variety of reasons why that's the case. But I thought this would be quite a funny point to end on, and again, I'll leave the links to all this stuff below the episode. But being an efficient, effective user of AI tools myself, I jumped over to Perplexity and asked, why are humans so bad at predicting the future, Perplexity, which I know some of the answers to, but not all. So what I thought you might find is quite fun here, and this is the final point number 4 in your defense against AI getting shoved in your face everywhere, is AI. There is a big bubble going on, right, in AI at the moment, driven largely as usual by technology investment and people trying to make a fast buck before the, as my one of my business partners describes it, the lipstick era is over. Putting lipstick on the pig, just being like, oh, it's got AI's in it, mate. It's brilliant. So here's why we're bad at predicting the future, right? Cognitive and psychological bias. So everyone at the minute, because everyone else is saying it, is saying AI is going to do loads of stuff. Not that many people are actually sort of really interrogating why they think that. And that's because of these reasons. So overconfidence. We're all kind of overestimating what we know is going to happen in the world of AI, what we know people want, what we know is going to be efficient, what we know is going to happen. Very, very overconfident. Just be very careful of that, because overconfidence leads to ruin in some cases. What I am confident of is that a lot of this AI hype, as we were saying back in 2023 in the first series, is driven by people who want to make money. It's not necessarily driven by, higher values and wanting to improve the human experience. Like the Swiss are there, as we covered in a previous show, but most other people are not. Projection bias. This is probably one of the worst ones, right? I think stuff, therefore everyone else thinks stuff. That's like just a basic human issue that we all need to be aware of. Obviously, as someone who talks a lot about my own opinions, I'm very aware of that, and you will be as well, because you're listening to them. Optimism bias is a funny one. It's not one that I suffer from, to be honest. Often assuming overly positive expectations, or you think things are going to be better than they are. So there's been a lot of amusing, sort of chat about like the possible terrible outcomes of AI. But ultimately, we all just think, look, everything's going to be better tomorrow, isn't it? It'll be better next week. Like, that's what keeps us going as people. So look, we're all thinking, like, AI is going to be here forever now. It's baked in. But we've thought that about a lot of things before, and a lot of things have died on their asses, Go back a couple of 100 years, nobody had imagined cars would be here. Everyone would be thought horse, what's the word I'm looking for? Horse breeders, people who raise horses, thought they were onto a solid business model when we were all, in carts and riding around. And then suddenly the combustion engine arrived, and, horses are like just for fun now. They're not needed, Well, they are if you're like a cowboy or a cow woman, or maybe a farmer. I don't know. There's places where horses are needed, but not as widely as before. Is the point I'm making? And look, these are the other ones, right? So complexity and uncertainty. We are very bad at understanding the factors that define what's going to happen next, right? And philosophically speaking, we don't necessarily want to know, because if we could, with any degree of accuracy, predict the future, that risks locking us into what's called a deterministic way of living, which starts to remove any sort of real sense of agency we have over where things are going. So the fact that we don't know what's going to happen right now is inherently part of how we shape a sort of path into the unknown and how things happen, how they do. If we knew how things were going to happen, they might not happen that way, and therefore it becomes impossible to predict what's going to happen, and it undermines the whole deterministic model. So without getting too lost in philosophical sort of byways there, this is super interesting because AI and obviously most logically sort of structured technologies are all based on the idea that we have sort of finite rules and systems, and that's why they're so great at predicting stuff. Where AI is sort of starting to cross a boundary is that it's not just based on necessarily finite systems. It is still based on logical reasoning, and that's where the crux of the sort of distinction between how we operate and how AI operates, sits. But this is super interesting from a sort of purely academic perspective, because uncertainty is what makes things exciting. We don't want to be certain about stuff. We're never going to be certain about the entire big picture. And look, this is where like the entire industry could collapse tomorrow, right? And then we're all going to have to be going back to doing what we were doing before. So, we can't just rush in there and shift immediately with no forethought. Getting a bit off topic there. Look, the other two, which I kind of wanted to end on here, were it's the other one, sorry, is just emotional influence, right? So this is really key, and I want to pull those other 4 points back to this one, right? Is that the jobs that I deal with most directly, which is people in marketing, people in sales, anyone in a growth-oriented role in the businesses that I deal with and the brands I work with, right? The areas that I'm operating in, me and my team, are all very human-centric, right? They're like, we're trying to market things to people, we're trying to sell things to people. These are emotionally driven decisions and interactions that cannot be replicated by a machine. And I think the ultimate firmest defense of this stuff, if you are indeed, getting pressure from all sides to be using AI everywhere, is no machine at present can understand my intent and the thinking behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. We can track behavior and we can understand elements of behavior, and we'll get very excited about how we can, stitch all that together and build attribution models and all that other garbage we were talking about a couple of episodes ago. But what ultimately drives me to do something is a black box trapped in my own mind. And unless I am honest enough and self-aware enough to be able to, identify and explain those motivations, no one's ever going to know that. And that is where, the human in the loop comes in, as my friend Ross is very fond of saying. Like you need people to understand people, and the tools that we have are just tools. And ultimately, this is where I think you need to, your sort of bastion of defense needs to be if people are trying to force AI on you, is like, you got to defend those areas that only people can service and sort of support. And that comes right back to a lot of trends in B2B, just coming back to sort of a more specific use case. B2B buying decisions right now are all being made on trust, and they're all very heavily influenced by emotion, not by the cold, hard rules of logic. And you cannot build trust and have that emotional connection only using automated AI-driven slop, because everybody sees through it, nobody's interested. You still got to talk to a person at the end of the day. So, look, bit of a rambling sort of discourse today on certain aspects of AI and where it is, but I hope you found that sort of some of that resonated a little bit, because it was just trying to zoom out of the day-to-day discussions we've been having over the past few episodes, and just kind of pull this back up to like a theme that's emerged, because people are getting fired everywhere, right? Like, there's a lot of job insecurity in certain areas in places we work in. And I've heard a lot of stupid chat about how AI is just going to replace insert function, insert whatever. And I just don't think it is. So just wanted to sort of, be a voice here to give you confidence that you can just be like, do you know what? Like, I'm a person doing person-oriented stuff. If we're not here, what is the point of anything, right? And I'm sure like me, many of you did not join your company and start doing your job to just be a button pusher, controlling loads of like little robot minions. Like, that is just kind of depressing, right? Unless you love that, in which case fair play to you. So I'll end on that somewhat weird note. Love to hear your thoughts. If you're getting pressure to use AI in your role in particular. I would love to hear how and why. As I've been chatting to everyone that we're kind of talking to at the moment, we're doing a bit of market research across 3 areas. The B2B buying journey, specifically, identifying and engaging audiences as a precursor to that, and also the actual sort of growth journey, and obviously how that's enabled by AI and assisted by it and augmented by it, not replaced by it. So look, if you were like, Stu, this has been complete nonsense, I can't believe that you think those things, come and talk to me. I would love to hear what you think. If you're like, man, I agree so hard, come and talk to me as well. I love to hear people agree with me. Let's talk. If you would like to participate in the research, also come and talk to me. I'm looking for people to share what they can and talk about their actual day-to-day experiences with this stuff. But look, for now, I once again have been Stuart Turner. This has been the Flow State Podcast. It's Friday, almost lunchtime. Look busy for half an hour. Go enjoy yourself for lunch, and I hope to be chatting to you again next time.